Hello there. So today we will talk about why open differentials suck. Uh, so following yesterday's video on the analysis of my crash, no drogcam made a really good observation. So this person, so no drogcam commented, the patches Sonoma puts on their surface are generally extra grippy in the dry but extra slippery in the wet. The moment you hit the patch in the wet while on throttle, oversteer was to be expected. This was super enlightening, so thank you very much, no drug cam. Because if you look at the video of the crash, you will see that is exactly what happens. So you see, the minute I go over that like shiny patch, the rear steps out. So what happened? Basically, when I went over the slippery patch, because my car has an open differential, the rear left wheel spins up. So the picture on the left is the kind of steady state condition just before going over that slippery patch. The vehicle from a yaw point of view is in balance. There's some propulsion being added, and you know the tires are generating lateral force as well to get the car around the corner. But then the left rear tire spins up over the slippery patch. The moment it leaves the slippery patch, because it is traveling, because the left rear tire is now rotating at a faster speed than the rear right, the moment it catches, it generates a lot more forward propulsion, which also reduces the lateral force it is able to generate. And then if you look at the force diagram, this will end up generating a large yaw moment, which is what happens in the video. So the vehicle rotates to the right, as can be seen. You know, I'm counter steering to the left, and this is kind of the starting point for the chain of events that results in me hitting the tire wall. So yeah, this is why an open differential sucks. Looking through the documentation for the Porsche stability management, so I had PSM off, but what the documentation is saying is that even with PSM off, in theory it should prevent one-sided spinning of the wheels. But I'm guessing that in this case it was not doing it fast enough. So the reaction, because the it is all brakes based, and therefore the hydraulics system needs some time to actuate, and therefore there's probably a small delay between when the system notices that the rear left tire is spinning up to when it's able to actually stop that from happening. And yeah, because it's so quick, that tire patch was not very long. I'm guessing that's why it was not able to catch it and prevent what happened from happening. So let's talk about differentials in a little bit more detail, because it's something we haven't yet done on this channel. We'll get a little bit technical, but and so to do that, let's look at some diagrams. So I'm taking this from a very good article. So you can find this paper at this address. I will post a link to it as well. So first of all, introduction. So this is a diagram to kind of explain the characteristics of different differentials, and in this instance, it is explaining the characteristics of an open differential and a spool. Spool is basically a solid connection between the left and right wheel. So what it is saying, so let's start with the open differential. What it is saying is that for an open differential, you're basically working on this line, and therefore the torque on the left wheel and the right wheel are exactly the same no matter what. And as a consequence, this means that the one side can just keep spinning and spinning. The good thing is this means you can get around corners without wearing out the tires. The left and rear tires will not be fighting each other as they traverse different distances while you go through a corner. But it's got its performance drawbacks as we've discussed, and so not just in terms of not being able to put down the power as you're exiting corners where the inside tire is spinning up, but also for low is slippery, so low mu slippery conditions, or where the surface grip is changing a lot. An open differential makes the car very unpredictable. So let's go and let's discuss the spool. So the spool, it is showing two solid lines on the on these two axes. The way you have to think about it is that the line kind of shows the entire area in which the two tires are able to work in. So if one tire is just on ice or in the air, then you're on the vertical or the horizontal axis. So let's say the left-hand wheel is in the air and you're applying throttle, then the right-hand wheel will be generating all of the torque, and how much torque is being generated is depending on the throttle position, gearing, etc., etc. But it's all of this area in between that the spool is able to to use, depending on the grip, on the grip of the surface grip at the left and right wheel and right tires. And on this side it's driving torque, and on the left side is overrun or engine braking. So it's important to discuss this just so that once we go to the various differentials, it's easy to understand what's going on. So what would have happened if I had locked tires left and right, or either with a spool or a lock differential? So if I had a lock differential, then the rear left tire would not have spun up over that slippery patch. And so even if I was applying power over that, as the rear left tire was going over that slippery patch, what would have happened is that the rear right would be generating more propulsion than the left, and even though the left rear tire would have lost some lateral grip, the increased propulsion from the right rear would have somewhat mitigated the effects from that, in terms of initiating a yaw acceleration. So in general, it would have been way less dramatic from going over that slippery patch. So of course it would have been better not to go over the slippery patch, but I didn't know the track as well as I should, and I did. So, but the point is, if I had a locking differential or a spool, so a solid rear axle, then it might not have happened. Um, so let's talk about limited slip differentials. So the the type that is typically used on racing vehicles are what's known as a clutch type. They typically you can typically set them up with different ramp angles and number of plates. So in essence, you've got a number of plates that work like clutches, and in the middle there's a you can see here when with application of torque you are driving some wedges to clamp these plates together, which then gives you the locking effect. This is why when you have a very low ramp angle, so what you see here, like 30 degrees, if the angle is very small, then the multiplication of that torque into force is very large, and therefore you have a very strong locking effect. Whereas if the angle was very large, then it's much more gentle, and it's approaching more like it's acting a little bit more like a open differential. So like imagine if this little wedge was pushing against a 90 degree, it wouldn't be trying to force those plates, those wedges open at all, and wouldn't be pressing on those plates. But the interesting thing, so that's the thing with the angle. So you can see, if you have bigger angles, you're getting closer to a spool, and if you have if you have smaller angles, you get closer to a spool. If you have bigger angles, you're closer to an open differential. But the interesting thing, I would say, is the preload. So the difference between the so the preload is a base level of locking in the differential below which you will never go. But of course, as the differential starts to wear out, those plates, and you start losing the preload, then obviously you start losing that. But the thing is, if there's a certain preload, it means that for low torque levels, the differential is in essence working like a spool, and therefore for low mu, so slippery conditions, you in essence start having a locked rear axle, which is very good from a predictability point of view. So that's definitely helpful for performance driving in the wet. And yeah, if we look at these two diagrams, the red lines kind of show the effect from the preload that you are able to apply to the differential. So this is in essence like if you just put like a Belleville washer or a spring with a certain preload that are pushing on the plates, no matter what kind of torque the engine or drivetrain is applying, and then as the torque from the drivetrain is increasing, the pressure coming from those ramps and wedges starts to take over. So what we're seeing on the right is obviously very strange, but it is showing, in extreme what you could do. So it's like in the so this would be basically like a one-way differential, more or less. It's got on the deceleration side, it's got a very high angle of 80. So there's almost no effect coming from the driveline torque to preload the discs. And on the driving side, it's got a very low angle, and therefore it's got very, it's acting very close to a spool. Um, so this type of differential that you can tune like this, some examples are Drexler, GAR transmission, OSGkin. I put WaveTrack in question mark because WaveTrack it's in essence it's a automatic torque biased differential with a certain amount of preload. And so I'm pretty sure you cannot change the so it doesn't have something like the ramp angles that you can play with in a traditional like Salisbury type of clutch based LSD. But it does have this like preload to probably help in low mu situations. And yeah, that actually brings us to the topic of automatic torque biasing differentials. The most well known is probably Quaife. So the way these work, there's a certain the benefit of this type of differential is that one, they're quite cheap relative to the clutch type ones, because the preloading is done via a type of gear system that doesn't require maintenance, and so the lack of need of maintenance is another benefit of this type of differential. So if you want to just put it in and forget about it, this type is great. So they're cheap, they're more reliable, so and doesn't require maintenance. So what's the drawback? The drawback. So the drawback is mainly that you don't have the preload. So not having the preload is both good and bad. So it's good in the sense that you don't have added understeer. So the issue with the preload is that for low torque levels, you can basically get the left tire to fight the right tire as you're entering a turn. So imagine trying to enter a turn. The base level of preload is trying to keep the two tires spinning at the same rate, but if you're turning into a corner, the outside tire wants to spin faster. So that's something which the you don't have that issue with the ATB type of differential, but then they lack this base level of preload, which makes them I suspect more unpredictable in the wet. And I think this is probably the reason you don't see them in racing applications, due to the fact that from a driver confidence and predictability point of view, they're probably a little bit worse. And so that actually means that WaveTrack could potentially be a very interesting product, because it's I think it's only around $1,000. So assuming you don't want to be tuning these curves, then if you're okay with if you're okay with the torque multiplication from one side to the other, then maybe the WaveTrack is a very good way to go, because it's a pretty cheap LSD automatic torque bias differential, which doesn't require maintenance, but has a certain amount of preload. So talking through this, I was basically trying to consider what differential to put into 981. I myself hadn't yet made up the decision by the time I had to go to the first track day. But looking back, it really makes me think of a funny article I read some time ago, which was titled "Why you should purchase all the mods you were considering for your car as early as possible. Um, it's it's funny in the sense that it definitely doesn't sound very financially responsible. Um, but then in my specific case, I think if I had a locking differential that prevented the crash, then maybe that would have been actually cheaper than the crash itself. Um, but yeah, on a more serious note, I think the point of the article was saying that if you can afford it, you know, um, the earlier you put the mods on your car, the longer you can actually enjoy the mods for. Um, I thought it was still a funny article. Um, but anyway, hopefully this video has helped you, form your own opinions on what type of limited slip differential or automatic torque biasing differential you might want to add to your car. Please let me know in the comments what you think, whether I got anything wrong, and whether you think a LSD might have prevented my crash. Okay, signing off till next time.